Real parents, real stories. It's the Meet the Parents podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Meet the Parents podcast. Every week we bring you a mix of both mums and dads discussing a variety of parenting related topics. Real parents, real stories. I'm Tim and tonight I'm delighted to be joined by Hannah and Vicky. Good evening, ladies.
Evening.
Hello.
So on this week's podcast, seeing as it's Mother's Day this coming Sunday, we're going to talk about some topics that are a bit more mum specific than usual. So we're going to discuss the array of birthing options open to parents. We'll talk a little bit more about the long road to conception that Vicky is currently on and that she touched on in episode 1. And we'll also have a quick chat about Mother's Day from both sides of the fence. So let's start this week by talking about birthing options. So as we're recording this podcast, Hannah is now approaching 32 weeks. Now, you wrote a post about this topic recently, so why don't we start by doing a quick rundown of the options open to parents who are trying to prepare for an impending birth?
Yeah, I think obviously the further along into a pregnancy you get, you start thinking, what's going to happen? I mean, this is my second pregnancy, and you know, all being well, hopefully it'll go just as well as the first did with the labour and the birth. But you start just weighing up your options, and I think because Toby's birth was such a relatively straightforward one, I was sort of whirring around in my head, do we want a home birth? Do we want to go to a midwife centre instead of a hospital and all these things? So just sort of jotted it all down in a post really about the options that you've got for antenatal care. Do you stick with the NHS? Do you go private? And then with the birth itself, home birth with or without a pool, going to hospital, going to a midwife centre, having a doula, or you know, all these different options that are available to us, and if money were no object, private care would be absolutely wonderful. But so it's just sort of analysing those different options and weighing up what's best for Phil and I as individuals, as well as, you know, managing obviously to juggle childcare with Toby as well.
Yes, so what have you done so far in terms of antenatal care?
We have just stuck with the NHS midwife team. It's the same team, and in fact the same midwife that I was under for my care with Toby. There are a group of private midwives available in the area, but to be honest, we just kind of felt like we were comfortable with the care that we were receiving, and so we've stuck with them.
And Vicky, what did you do with Grace?
Actually, I was fairly lucky with my labour and Grace because it went according to how I planned it in my head. I really wanted a water birth. So I went into labour on the 1st of January around midday. It was slow to start with. And the following day at around 12:30 midday in the afternoon, I managed to get into the birthing pool. At that point, my waters hadn't broken. So the the midwife had to do it for me. And I just survived on gas and air, and Grace was born at about 20 to 7 in the evening. So, yeah, I was lucky. I had my own music with me, so she was born to the strains of Go West.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it was pretty straightforward. I was very lucky.
Yeah, now for us, we did both NHS and NCT classes, and I have to say we did prefer the NCT ones despite the cost. I think we found them a bit more relaxed, and I think it definitely helped us that the group was smaller too.
Phil and I did NCT classes with Toby, and we found the same thing, Tim. We'd only recently moved to the area, and it was fantastic to have that support network, and I'm still in touch with the ladies and husbands and children that we met there. And this time around, I have to say I've not done any, and I don't know if it's because I'm already in the area and I've got my mummy friends in inverted commas, and so don't feel the need for it as much because I've already got my support group around me. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we were exactly the same. You know, it was a great support network. I mean, it's great for the dads, but it's particularly important, I think, for the mums. And second time round, we didn't do any of the classes the first time round, whereas we'd had all the bags packed in about 30 weeks. Second time round, it was, we'll get round to it next week.
Yeah, I didn't have my bag packed at all. Grace was 10 days early. I thought, I'll be all right. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no.
Oh my gosh.
Hannah, do you want to talk quickly about what you see as the pros and cons of the various birthing options?
Yeah, I mean, I had Toby in an NHS hospital, and chances are that that's where we've decided we're going to go again this time around. I think one thing that sort of weighs on my mind a little bit, and it did last time, that so many of the NHS hospitals are really overstretched and understaffed, and, you know, we know all the issues that they're having. They offer wonderful service, and I can't fault the care that we received at our hospital. But likewise, I've known of times when they've had to close the doors to the maternity ward. It's already a half an hour drive for us to get to that hospital, and if they turn us away, we've got at least another 45 minutes to an hour to get to the next nearest NHS hospital. So whilst the care provided was exceptional, there is that sort of slight fear of being turned away because they are so busy. Private hospital, yes, there is one not far from the NHS hospital we'll go to, but obviously money plays a huge part in that. Another option that is available to us where we currently live is midwife-led unit, and that again is something I considered, but then if I did need to be taken to hospital, it would be basically going the completely wrong direction for my parents having Toby and things like that. So we kind of ruled that out based on the inconvenience if I did need to end up in hospital. And home birth was something I was really keen on, and it's still something I'm toying with. I love the idea of being at home. I love the idea of having my creature comforts around me. But I'm also slightly nervous of where on earth we'd manage to fit everything and everyone, because I would love a water birth this time around, and we just simply don't think I could fit one in the living room. And there's also the sort of practicalities. I'm not really sure how it would all work with like tidying up and things like that, you know, emptying out the pool and clearing up all the towels and all that sort of thing. And I just kind of think, actually, would I end up feeling less relaxed?
Now, you see, I've become a big advocate of home birthing. That was something we agreed on, prompted by my wife's intense dislike of hospitals. And all three of ours were planned home births, although only the first two actually arrived at home. So there are a lot of factors at play. It definitely helps if you have the space in your house for a birthing pool, and we're lucky that we have a separate dining room, so that's where the pool went. Although it's by no means necessary to have one. Third time round we were going to do without the pool altogether. It also helps that we've got a detached house, so disturbing the neighbours for us wasn't as big a concern. And that, as I said, having said that, you know, third time round we didn't bother with the pool at all, which was just as well, given that Cara ended up being born in hospital. But I think the best bit about a home birth is, and this sounds a bit obvious, but the fact that you're at home. You know, there's no mad dash to the hospital. Like you, we live in the middle of a triangle where we've got three hospitals in opposite directions that are sort of 30 to 40 minutes drive away. So that was a concern. But yeah, there's no mad dash to the hospital. You're not competing for a birthing pool or for the midwife's attention. And it was certainly much easier for both of us to relax in familiar surroundings. You know, being able to grab food and drink, all that kind of jazz. I guess downsides. Mum can't have an epidural, although you can have pretty much everything else. Yeah, as you were wondering, Hannah, yes, it can be quite messy. Yeah, there were a couple of consequences of having a pool in our house that I hadn't really thought through the logistics of, that were a bit of a shock to the system the morning after. Yeah, I guess not so much a downside, but something that, again, we hadn't really appreciated is how quickly you're left on your own after the birth. I mean, Isaac was maybe an hour and a half old when our midwife left us, all alone in an empty house with a tiny baby. And yeah, we had one of those horrific now what moments at which the enormity of the road ahead of us suddenly hit us both. And I'm not sure I've been as terrified of anything in my entire life.
I mean, I left hospital when Toby was only about 6 hours old, and with hindsight, I wish I'd insisted on staying longer or being transferred to the midwife-led unit purely for that support. Feeding and like you say, it's just so scary. and you've got this tiny, tiny, helpless little creature, and you're suddenly completely responsible for them.
No, I was lucky because Grace was born on the Tuesday and I didn't leave hospital till the Friday, and I'm so glad I did that.
We've talked about both your experiences with birth, so I suppose I probably ought to share mine as well. Now, we did choose the home birth route, but each of our three was very different. So for both the boys, we dismantled our dining room and replaced it with a hired birthing pool, or as it came to be known, the jacuzzi, which was what it was used for most of the time. Now, Isaac was born in the pool after a relatively uncomplicated labour. Toby's arrival was actually easy, a little bit too easy, in fact. You know how childbirth is depicted in American TV shows. So you get a team of ever so pretty medical staff gliding around the delivery room in pristine surgical gowns to the strains of, I don't know, something by Coldplay probably. Yeah, it was nothing like that. 11-minute labour.
Wow.
No midwife.
Wow.
Not even enough time to get in the pool. I performed the not inconsiderable feat of not dropping Toby as he was ejected into the world like one of those clay pigeon launchers on the rug in our living room, which promptly ended up being taken to the tip the next day. And I'm not going to go into that any further. But you can work out the rest. And Cara, on the other hand, was 18 days late, as I've said, and Heather was actually at the hospital at the time to discuss getting induced when her waters broke. So she arrived in the hospital room, and actually, having experienced 2 home births already, I found the experience really weird. So I'd been so involved in both the first 2, and it felt like I'd suddenly gone to being the proverbial fifth wheel, and I was like, hello, I've done this before. And the nurses were like, yeah, whatever, stay out of the way, sperm boy. I think it's true what they say. No two births are the same, and everyone's circumstances are different in terms of what you prefer, where you happen to live relative to hospitals, and the quality of the care that you have access to. So, yeah, it's difficult, but hopefully that's given people a few thoughts or ideas as to some of the options that are available to people.
If Carlsberg did parenting, it would probably be the best sub-living wage job in the world. Please parent responsibly. If you agree to become a parent, you waive your rights to weekend lie-ins, going to the toilet undisturbed, and you will wish that Jeremy Hunt had imposed a new working hours contract on you because it would probably be fairer.
You might recall that Vicky talked about how she and Ross are preparing to embark on the egg donation process. Now, Vicky, this is the culmination of a long, long journey.
That's right, yeah, it's coming up for, it would be 3 years in June that we decided to start trying for a family. Not that we didn't have one already, but, Ross doesn't have any children of his own. And I've obviously got Grace from a previous relationship. And when we first met, we wanted to sort of, as you do in a new relationship, you just wanted to make sure that you were right for each other. And Ross didn't really come into Grace's life until later on. So then we decided that we'd like to start trying for a family. And of course, you don't really think about it at the time. I thought, I've got one already. It's going to be a fairly straightforward process. So we got pregnant quite quickly, actually, but that was very short-lived, and about 6 weeks later, we lost that one. After that, it hit me quite hard. I had quite a bad year. And then we got pregnant again, but that time was an ectopic pregnancy, and it was self-aborting. So thankfully, I didn't need any surgery, and everything remained intact. So we thought, well, this isn't really working. We need to investigate this further. I had tests, and we found out that my egg reserves were low. And we just decided that the odds were too long. So at that point, we were trying to decide what else we could do. So we investigated egg donation. I had quite a few emotional difficulties about the whole process to start with, coming to terms with the fact that the egg wouldn't be mine. So genetically, obviously it would be somebody else. But then I looked into epigenetics, and it wasn't until we went to the fertility show in November that I really understood the process properly.
For those of us who don't know much about the process of egg donation, which is probably most of us, and maybe some of our listeners might be considering a similar possibility, talk us through the technical side of what's involved in the process.
We found a clinic, and that's quite tricky to start with. You've got to make sure you find a clinic that you feel comfortable with. And I have to say, if you are considering doing this, going to the fertility show, it's held in November at Olympia. It is really invaluable because you get to meet different clinics. And that was the first process, finding the right one, and then understanding the process of how it works. So what they do is you have a discussion with them, and Ross is a big lover of spreadsheets. So he put together spreadsheets of every single clinic, of all the pros and cons and what they charge. Because obviously, a lot of them say, oh, it's only going to cost this, but you don't think about all the medication and things like that, which are extra on top of just the process itself. So what you do is you have a discussion with a clinic. You tell them you're happy to go ahead. They wanted to know from us when we would be ready. So in January, we said we were looking to come over February and March time. So they said to us, what they'll do is prepare a medical protocol. So the first thing I had to do was fill in a questionnaire discussing all my medical history, also my own particular characteristics. So my weight, my height, my eye colour, my hair colour, and also all things like my interests as well. And then they came back to us with a medication protocol. So I've got a timetable of all the medication that I need to take. And they also sent us a list of donors of the similar characteristics to mine. And from that list of donors, we selected who we felt we would like. You don't get a photograph, you just get details. So you get weight, height, hair colour, eye colour, and what they're studying or what their interests are. And then, as I said, I needed to wait for the first day of my new cycle to start. So as you listen to this podcast, I'll be in Cyprus. The next process is that when we get there, the day after we arrive, Ross has to go and do his side of the bargain, whereupon they will artificially inseminate the eggs and they'll grow them. And then after 5 days, they'll transfer 2 eggs into me the day before we come home.
To anyone who might be considering this as an option, what would you say are the pros and cons to consider?
I mean, the first thing is we've chosen to go abroad because we've chosen that we would like our donor to remain anonymous. In this country, you have to declare who you are. So bear that in mind. Also, one thing I didn't realise is that you can gender select in some countries and you can't in others. I thought you wouldn't be able to at all. So that's just personal preference. So that's something else to bear in mind. Also, the other thing to bear in mind is obviously it's costly. It's cheaper to go abroad, actually. I think in this country it can cost £10,000 to £12,000, and going abroad it's costing us about 6 to 7. So you've got to bear in mind the cost, and also the emotional impact it has on you. You know, it's taken me a while to understand epigenetics and the fact that actually my makeup will have a bearing on the baby. You know, you've got to be emotionally ready to understand the process and accept the situation. You know, Ross isn't Grace's real dad, and we've got a mixture of a family, and it doesn't really matter about blood and DNA. What really matters is how much you love each other.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you started talking about the emotional impact on you, but I guess also it has an emotional impact on both Ross and Grace as well. So how has it affected the two of them?
Yeah, absolutely. When Ross has been up and down, so he's found it hard, and you don't realise that just because you're the woman who's going to be carrying the baby and you're the one trying to get physically pregnant, you know, mentally again it affects him, and he's had some emotional ups and downs of it all. It's been hard on both of us, you know, it's had an impact on our relationship. And actually now the process is getting underway. Ross is going to have more involvement in my vlogs, And we've been discussing making a documentary of the whole process whilst we're in Cyprus. So it does have a big impact on him, and I think at times he's felt quite helpless. But he's been brilliantly supportive. The hardest thing is trying to explain to Grace what's going on, because she's 9, so she's obviously old enough to understand there's something happening, but not old enough to really understand the whole process of human biology and how how conception works. So what we've discussed with her is the fact that I'm going away to get my body better to help us have a baby, because she knows we've been trying and she keeps asking for a brother or sister. When I lost the second one close to Christmas, just before I lost it, she said, "What I'd really love for Christmas, Mum, is a brother or sister." And it was heartbreaking when I lost it, because I just thought, oh my God, I can't give her what she wants for Christmas now. But I know with the bigger picture, she's really looking forward to being a brother, a sister to another one. She's wanting it so much, and I think she understands why we're going away, but she doesn't know the full implications of it.
You also mentioned that you've been keeping a series of vlogs and that Ross is going to get more involved in those going forward. So do you want to tell us just a little bit about what you've been doing around those?
Yeah, sure. I think it's on its 6th one this weekend. So by the time you hear this podcast, there'll be another one published. And then we'll be doing a whole host of them whilst we're in Cyprus.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with us, Vicky. I'm sure everyone who's been following your story, either online or here, would wish you all the very best of luck, and we look forward to hopefully you sharing some good news with us when you return.
Thank you, Tim.
In the UK, the Channel Islands and Nigeria, at least, this Sunday is the 4th Sunday of Lent and therefore Mother's Day. Now, in the US, and indeed much of the rest of the world, it's actually celebrated on the 2nd Sunday of May, which this year falls on May the 8th. If you're in Indonesia, however, you're going to have to wait until December the 22nd for Mother's Day. Unlucky. So anyway, that's enough of a geography lesson for 1 week. So, Hannah, let's start with you. From a mum's perspective, what would you say are your must-haves or must-dos for Mother's Day?
Just loads and loads of cuddles, I think. Yeah, it's my second Mother's Day with Toby, so I'm just looking forward to lots of snuggles and just some nice times, probably singing silly nursery rhymes and such to keep him happy.
What about you, Vicky?
I don't have any major expectations, but Ross and Grace tend to make me stay in bed and sneak downstairs, and that's what they've done for the last 4 years. They've gone and made me breakfast and brought it up to me. And bless her, Grace loves getting me an orchid, so it's one of the reasons I love them, because they're all around my house. So last year she came up with a giant purple orchid, which was beautiful, and she always makes a card. She always wants to hand make one, and they're more special because they're individual then. And then for the last couple of years we've gone out for lunch. Year before last we went to the cinema. So yeah, it depends. I leave it to Ross and Grace to organise, and they usually come up trumps.
Yeah, and I guess, Vicky, you and I have got slightly older kids, so they can understand and participate in helping out a bit more on Mother's Day. So, what kind of stuff does Grace do to help Ross out?
Oh, she's great, actually. She's very thoughtful anyway. But on Mother's Day, she's always saying, "Sit down, Mum, you don't have to do anything." And she's great now. She makes cups of tea and all sorts. Child labour's amazing. But she's really kind, and she's very thoughtful. And, we've got our thing. One of our go-to programmes, is going to sound really sad, is Take Me Out. We have a real girly evening. We sit and watch, and he's good for her, and we have a really good chat. And we'll probably do something like a face mask. We do that if Ross is out at his gigs with his band. We sit and have girly times. So it's great. It's really nice. And she's very, like I say, she's very thoughtful. She'll make sure I don't have to do anything, and she'll say to Ross, "No, Mum, I can't do that because it's Mother's Day."
Yeah, for us, this year our kids are 8, 6 and approaching 4, so I guess the first thing that I'll try to get them to do is to give Heather the opportunity to have a lie-in beyond 6:30 and maybe even 7 o'clock. So yeah, so that will mean roping the kids into to help prepare breakfast. I mean, Hannah, what's likely to happen in your household? What's Toby likely to do to help fill out?
Possibly not very much. No, we're still undecided how we're going to spend the day. Chances are we're probably going to be going over to my parents and having a meal together, because obviously, I've still got my mum as well, and I still want to celebrate her. She does so much as well, helping out with Toby. We're very fortunate that my parents live close by, so it's sort of a time for me to appreciate everything my mum's done, and hopefully instill that in Toby, so when he's a little bit older he can appreciate all the things I do for him. But no, I think realistically, if he doesn't have too many typical 20-month-old tantrums, then we're on to a winner.
Yeah, it's funny. It's similar for us as well, because it's not just appreciating what the children's mother does, but it's also what our respective mothers do. So, for us this year, we're actually doing something a little bit different that we've done once, maybe twice before, which is to split up for Mother's Day. So I'm going to take the kids to London to take my mum out for lunch, while Heather heads south to visit her mum. Now she's in a nursing home, but her mum's been in and out of hospital a few times in recent months, so it's a good excuse for Heather to go down and see her anyway, and it at least means that both of us get to do something for both our mothers this year, rather than one or the other, or neither. So there you have it. That's our combined approaches to Mother's Day, both conventional and slightly less conventional. So before we go, any other business we want to talk about, or stuff we've been up to recently?
Well, we are hopefully going to be moving house. That's our big news of the week, is that we sold our house and had an offer accepted on one that we were interested in. So we're just keeping fingers and toes crossed that it all goes ahead, and taking bets as to whether we move before or after the baby is born. So get your bets in, and we'll see what happens first.
Yeah, moving house, birth. No stress at all. Really.
No, not at all. We like the easy life.
And Vicky, obviously we've talked about what's been on your mind predominantly over the last week or so, and indeed over the next couple of weeks. But anything else from your end you'd like to throw in?
I have to say, though, I mean, obviously I said we're going to Cyprus for a specific reason, but Ross and I have never travelled abroad together on a plane. So we're quite excited about that. And we get downtime in between the process to have some time to ourselves, actually. We've never been on holiday on our own together. Because obviously when Ross came into my life, Grace was already there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, actually. We're going to have some quality time together, some relaxation time. I've decided I'm not going to work too hard at all.
That sounds like a perfect way to be spending some time together. As for me, we're recording this podcast during half-term week. So what did I do? I took a day off during the week to take the boys up to what's now called the British Motor Museum. It used to be called the Heritage Motor Centre near Warwick, which I would thoroughly recommend, and where I randomly bumped into Sarah, who writes the blog Extraordinary Chaos, after we, in true blogger style, both posted photos on Instagram and realised we were in the same place at the same time. Small world. And that's it for this episode of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back again next week, but in the meantime, if you want to follow us outside of the podcast, and why wouldn't you, here's where you can find each of us online. So, Hannah.
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Budding Smiles, and my blog is buddingsmiles.co.uk.
And Vicky?
You can find me on Twitter, Vic, V-I-C, Welton, W-E-L-T-O-N, and my blog is Verily Victoria Vocalises, but the URL is vevivos.com.
And I'm on Twitter at ThatchamDad, and my blog is slouchingtowardsthatcham.com. So you can download this podcast on iTunes and on Android, on our website at meettheparentspodcast.com, and via a variety of podcasting apps. So do please give us a follow on Twitter at Parents Podcast, and on Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. Also, if you're on iTunes, do please give us a rating and a review. It makes a big difference to how visible we are in their podcast pages. So if you could spare a couple of minutes, that would be fantastic. All that remains is for me to say thanks very much for listening, and we hope you'll be back to join us again next week. Good night.